Hello everyone and welcome to my corner of the world. Today I'm going to share with you one of the products that's in the Stampin' Up catalogue, which is the Stampin Blends. Now they've been around a while, but I haven't really used them very much, and I decided that I would do a little bit of research and then do some videos on the different techniques to use them. So I'm actually going to be learning while I'm sharing with you as I work my way through. So today we're going to start with the basics, and we're just going to make this card. So these are the blends. They come in pairs. They come in a sort of a light as well as a dark version. The ones I've got here are Poppy Parade, and this is what I used on this card. And if you see, hopefully you can see that there is sort of a darkness and a lightness here. So this time, instead of using the red, I'm going to use Daffodil Delight. And my green, I'm going to use the same green that I used in my other card, which is Old Olive. Okay, now as far as basics are concerned, you need some card, either white or very vanilla, and you need to use the thick version of that. These blends are actually solvent based. They're alcohol, and it does bleed through your cardstock, and I'll show you that when I've finished working on it. And so using the thicker card tends to be a little bit more stable. You definitely do not want to use watercolor paper because that's got a very soft fibrous surface, and it'll actually make your the ink bleed into the cardstock, and you don't get a very good finish. So you can find the Stampin' Blends in the catalogue, and you can see that in the colour charts, and where there's these are the blends here. You can see that somebody who doesn't use them very much. I've got quite a few, but it makes me happy that I've also got some gaps. I don't feel quite so bad about it. So that's where to find them. Now, as I said, these markers are solvent based, alcohol based, and so when you are doing an outline, stamping your image, you need to use a water based ink, and that's what the Memento ink is for here. And so that there's not a huge amount of colour in, I've decided to use the Flowers of Friendship stamp set, and I'm going to be using this stamp here. And we're going to make just a very, very simple card. There's nothing too difficult about it. And so I'm going to ink up my my stamp, and I find that if I've got a stamp that's bigger than my ink pad, by turning it upside down and patting over, I find that I get a nice ink coverage. I can see where I've been. And I'm just going to simply stamp my little stem like that. And there we are. And while I've got my black ink, I'm going to use one of the greetings from that stamp set, and this says, "A little card, big thanks." Now, again, when I'm stamping my greetings, I think everybody has a tendency to try and keep it level and centered and stuff like that. Me, I don't want to stress about it. So I am literally going to stamp across the corner. And that doesn't matter if it's level, if it's centered. I'm not stressed, and I've got a lovely greeting there. So, as I said, I am going to use Daffodil Delight this time. So if you decide to try this technique, basically you just need to buy 2 sets of blends, some thick cardstock, and the Memento ink, and you'll see a list in the if you follow the link below this video to my blog, you'll see a list of my supplies with a link to my online store. You'll be able to get your pieces there. So I'm going to start with using the darker of my colours. Again, for no other reason that I thought that that's what I'd like to do. I know that others start with the light and go to the dark, but I'm learning. I'm teaching myself and sharing that with you. Now each blend has a thick brush end and a thinner writing end, and so the brush end is exactly that. It's just got a little brush on the end, and then the thin end is kind of more of a writing, sort of a bullet type end. So I'm going to start with my dark first, and I'm going to use the bullet end because this is quite a small flower and I don't want to get too crazy. So I'm just pulling up from the bottom. I've noticed over the years with flowers that they tend to be a little bit darker at the bottom and lighter at the tips of the petals. So I'm just using that little bit of knowledge, and I'm taking from the bottom and I'm just kind of sweeping up like that. Maybe you can just see. Haven't got an awful lot of ink on there, but if you like, just enough, what I think is just enough. Now, it doesn't take long for this to dry because it is solvent or alcohol based, it just evaporates, but I'm not going to put any more colour on that bit just yet. I'm going to do the dark side of my leaves. And again, the leaves are even smaller, so I'm just going to go ahead and use the bullet end. And I'm just going to follow the veins on my little leaves here, just to put some dark. Again, I've observed that the middle of leaves, the center part of leaves, tend to be a bit darker than the outer edges. Now I'm going to move to my light one. Now you'll see and probably hear that I'm taking a great deal of trouble to make sure that I put my caps back on. And again, because they're solvent, they're alcohol, they evaporate really quickly if you don't make sure that you've got your lids back on. So you have to listen for the snap. And this time I'm going to use the brush end because I want a bit more colour. And I don't use the point. The point will mash down. It's as you can see, it's very fine, but it's also a lot softer than the bullet end. So I like to use the side of the tip, and I'm just pulling up. I'm not going back and forth. I'm literally starting at the bottom where I had my darker one, and I am just pulling that colour up using the side. And that way I'm not putting any pressure on the tip. I'm not mashing it. It's going to stay good. And the other thing I'm trying to do is to stay away from the stamped edges. And I'm going to just go back and kind of just pull up a little bit. And that's because I'm just trying to put layers on my ink. Can you see? You can see the darker, you can see the light. And again, I'm going to just let that dry for a few moments before I go back. And this time I'm going to use the thin end, the bullet end. This is much firmer, and I'm literally just kind of putting like a little dot of colour just to take it up to the edges. And by doing that, I'm going to make sure, hopefully, that it doesn't go too wild and bleed across the black line into my paper. Now I'm going to do several different videos on these with the blends to sort of build up some techniques and some ideas, and so hopefully you'll come back and see those as well. So now I've got the light green and I've got the little bullet end, and again I'm just gently putting in the colour. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on my paper or my tip of my blends. Again, I just trying to make sure I get some of the ink but not lots and lots, and I'm staying clear of my edges, and let that just dry for a few moments, and then I'm just going to go back in. I'm just pulling in the kind of just pulling the little white bits in. Okay, this can be quite relaxing. Maybe it would be if I wasn't doing it on film. Okay, so there's my colours, and I'd like to just put a bit more definition in for the dark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put in a bit more of the green here. And they're called blends because the ink is blending in on itself to give you a smoother finish. And I'm going to go back in with my dark Daffodil Delight. Now this may seem that, you know, it's taking a bit long, but I'm just doing it very slowly just to show you how careful I'm being. And then I'm just going to go back in again with the pale and just kind of blend back in there. And I could sort of carry on building this colour up, but I think I'm going to pretty much leave it like that. And I'm just going to, the last little bit, I'm just going to go back here with my green, my pale green, and this is Old Olive. There we go. There. Can you see you've got those blends? Now, I also found when I left it sitting on the side that it actually looked a lot better after it had thoroughly dried. It looked a bit more realistic. And as you said, if you turn over, you can see that it actually does bleed through. Because I'm going to put this on another layer, then it's not going to matter. So there's a hint, is to make sure that you are going to use this on a layered card. You're not going to just do it straight onto the front of a card, which will actually bleed through. So I'm just going to put this on a little piece of Daffodil Delight cardstock, just so I'm going to pull my colours through. And then, oh, I dropped my card base. There we go. And then all I'm going to do is to take some dimensionals. Can see I don't waste any of it. This is like the edge of the sheet, so they're just as sticky as the ones in the middle, so I'm just going to use those. Those of you who follow my videos know that I like to put one on each corner and one in the middle. Get those backing off here. And then I'm just going to pop it to one side. So very simple, straightforward card, because basically I just wanted to work with the idea of the of the technique. Get used to using blends, and I'm just going to use some of these champagne rhinestones, and I'm gonna, now that's that one turned over, so I've got my picture tool here. In fact, how good it did me though, because it's gone and turned it over on itself. I'm just going to try and center that as best I can. So there we are. There's my first foray into Stampin Blends. If you've enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel so you'll get to see the other ones, the other techniques I'm going to build up using and learning how to use my blends alongside of you. Thank you very much for joining me today. Bye for now.